The great chamber of the Galactic Council stretched high above the assembled delegates, its crystalline walls reflecting the light of 1,000 distant stars. Giwu stood at the human podium, her hands gripped tight on the smooth metal surface. She had known this day might come. But knowing and experiencing were two very different things. Speaker Vreth rose from his seat, his scaled skin glittering under the chamber lights. The reptilian counselor had been building support for this vote for 3 standard years, and now his moment had arrived. His voice echoed through the vast space with absolute confidence. "Motion is simple," Vreth announced. "Humanity has occupied council membership for 150 years. In that time, what have they contributed? The Krillians provide military protection for 70 systems. The Metharians share their psychic network for instant communication. The Volters mine resources that fuel our civilization. But humans?" He paused for effect. "They do maintenance work. They file reports. They organize schedules. These are tasks any species could perform." Giwu felt her jaw tighten, but she remained silent. She had prepared her defense, but the council had already made up their minds. She could see it in their eyes, in the way they avoided looking at her directly. "Humanity occupies 17 colony worlds," Vreth continued. "These worlds could house species that actually advance our collective goals. The resources we spend on human infrastructure could be better utilized elsewhere. It is time we acknowledge the truth. Humanity is mediocre. They are pleasant enough, but they do not deserve a seat at this table." The murmur of agreement that rippled through the chamber made Jiwoo's stomach turn. She had walked these halls for 12 years as Earth's ambassador. She had negotiated treaties, resolved disputes, and built relationships with dozens of species. Now those same species would not meet her gaze. "Ambassador Jiwoo," Vreth said with mock courtesy, "do you wish to speak before we vote?" She stepped forward, composing her thoughts carefully. "Members of the council, I ask you to consider what you are truly voting for today. Yes, humanity does not have the most advanced weapons. We cannot read minds or move objects with thought. Our ships are not the fastest, and our worlds do not produce the most valuable minerals. But we have built something else. Something you take for granted." She activated the holographic display, showing a web of connections spreading across the known galaxy. "This is the trade network that ensures goods move efficiently between systems. Humans designed it. These are the maintenance schedules that keep stations operational across 47 sectors. Humans maintain them. These are the agricultural programs that have increased food production by 30% on frontier worlds. Humans developed them. These are the medical clinics serving populations that the major powers consider too small to matter. Humans run them." Vreth waved a clawed hand dismissively. "Exactly my point. Menial tasks. Important, perhaps, but hardly irreplaceable. Any competent species could learn to do these things. Then why haven't they?" Gu asked quietly. The question hung in the air for a moment before Vreth laughed. "Because we have allowed you to do them? We thought we were being generous, giving you purpose. But it is time humanity faced reality. You are not essential. You are convenient." The vote was called. Jiwoo watched as the display showed the results in real time. Red lights appeared across the board. Species after species voted for humanity's expulsion from the council. A few abstained, but only 2 voted against the motion. When it was finished, the count was overwhelming. 83 in favor, 2 opposed, 7 abstentions. "The motion passes," Vreth declared with obvious satisfaction. "Humanity is hereby given 1 standard galactic year to vacate all territories outside the Sol system. Your council membership is revoked. Your trade agreements are terminated. Your embassy staff must depart within 30 days. This session is adjourned." Jiwoo gathered her materials slowly, refusing to hurry despite the eyes watching her. As she walked toward the exit, she passed rows of seated delegates. Most looked away. A few had the decency to appear uncomfortable. But Speaker Vreth watched her with undisguised triumph. As she neared the great doors, movement caught her eye. In the upper galleries where support staff sat, dozens of aliens were standing. Not the counselors or ambassadors, but the technicians, clerks, translators, and maintenance workers. They were watching her leave with expressions she recognized: worry, fear. They understood something the council did not. Outside the chamber, Jiwoo found her assistant, Hannah, waiting with her engineering team. Hannah's face was calm, but her eyes were sharp with anger. "We listened to the broadcast," Hannah said. "I have already contacted Admiral Taeyong. He is mobilizing the evacuation fleet." "1 year," Jiwoo said. "They gave us 1 year to remove 50 million humans from across the galaxy." "We will need every day of it," Hannah replied. "I am preparing the list of all human-maintained systems. There are thousands of them. Power grids, life support networks, water purification systems, communication relays. We built them. We installed them. We maintain them. Will you leave instructions?" Gu asked. Hannah smiled coldly. "Detailed instructions. Complete manuals. Everything they need to keep the systems running. Whether they bother to read them is not our problem anymore." They walked together through the diplomatic quarter, passing buildings that represented hundreds of alien species. Gi-woo had spent years building friendships here, or so she had thought. Now she wondered how many of those relationships had been genuine. Her communicator chimed. It was a private message from one of the few allies humanity still had, a delegate from a minor species called the Fenari. The message was brief. "We tried to warn them. They would not listen." "I am sorry," Gu replied simply. "Not your fault. Take care of your people." As they reached the human embassy, staff were already beginning to pack. Word had spread quickly. Gu saw tears on some faces, anger on others, but mostly she saw determination. Humanity would leave with dignity. They would fulfill every obligation, complete every task, and leave nothing undone. "Gather everyone," Jiwoo told Hannah. "I want to address the staff tonight. And contact Earth. Tell them to prepare for the largest return migration in our history. We are coming home." That night, as Jiwoo stood before her assembled staff, she chose her words carefully. "They have called us mediocre. They have dismissed our value. They believe we are icily replaced. We will not argue with them. We will not fight them. We will simply leave, but we will do it right. Every system we built, we document. Every task we performed, we record. We leave nothing broken. We give them every chance to succeed without us." She paused, looking at the faces watching her. "And then we will see what they have truly lost." The evacuation began 3 days after the council vote. Admiral Taeyong coordinated the operation from his flagship. The Resilience, watching his transport ships spread across the galaxy to gather humanity's scattered population. 50 million people needed to return home, and every one of them had built a life among the stars. Hannah worked from a station in the Arcturus sector, overseeing the shutdown of systems humanity had built over 15 decades. Her team moved methodically from facility to facility, documenting everything. They tagged each piece of human-installed equipment, recorded every modification made to alien technology, and compiled maintenance schedules that stretched years into the future. "This is the water purification system for the Krillian military base on Vendor Prime," Hannah explained to her replacement, a Krillian engineer named Thros. "It processes waste from 17 different species, each with different biological needs. The filters need to be changed on a rotating schedule, or you will have cross-contamination." Thros barely glanced at the documentation she offered. "Our engineers are far more advanced than humans. We will have no trouble with a simple filtration system." Hannah kept her expression neutral. "Of course, the manuals will be in the central database if you need them." "We will not," Thros said dismissively. Similar scenes played out across thousands of installations. Human technicians tried to transfer knowledge to their replacements, only to be met with indifference or outright contempt. The galaxy had voted that humans were mediocre, and now everyone believed it. On the agricultural world of Kesher, Biora supervised the final harvest from the hybrid crops she had developed. The planet had been barren when she arrived 30 years ago. Now it produced enough food to feed 6 neighboring systems. She had combined farming techniques from 11 different species, creating plants that thrived in Kesher's harsh climate. The Voltari, an administrator who would replace her, watched the harvest with calculating eyes. "You will leave the seed stocks?" he asked. "Everything is cataloged and stored," Biora replied. "But you should know, these crops require specific care. The soil needs to be rotated between 3 different nutrient mixes. If you plant the same fields 2 seasons in a row, the yield drops by 70%. Yes, the administrator said, waving away her concerns. "We understand farming. You may go." Biora looked at the fields one last time. She had spent 3 decades of her life making this world bloom. Now she would watch someone else take credit for her work, at least until the first harvest failed. Young Mi packed her belongings in her small quarters aboard the Krillian research station, Omega-7. She had maintained the station's life support systems for 8 years. The job was complex, requiring her to balance atmospheric needs for 7 different species, each breathing different gas mixtures at different pressures and temperatures. Her replacement, a young Krillian named Vesic, arrived early for orientation. Young Mi had prepared a comprehensive training program, but Vesic seemed more interested in his datapad than her explanations. "The Metherian section requires precise humidity control," Young Mi said, pointing to the relevant controls. "If it drops below 60%, they get respiratory distress. If it goes above 75%, their skin develops infections. The automated system handles it, but you need to check the sensors twice per shift. Sometimes they drift out of calibration." "I am a certified environmental engineer," Vesic said coldly. "I do not need a human to explain basic atmospheric maintenance." Young Mi bit back her response. She had tried. That was all she could do. Dahine managed the logistics of the Aztecas withdrawal from a coordination center on Earth. His screen showed the movement of thousands of ships, carrying humans home from every corner of known space. The operation was extraordinarily complex, but humanity had become experts at complex logistics. That was one of their supposedly mediocre skills. "We have a problem with the outer rim evacuations," his assistant reported. 3 colonies are refusing transport until they finish current projects." "What kind of projects?" Dahine asked. "Medical supplies for the Fenari worlds. Construction of a new water system for the Pleth mining colony. Educational programs for the Sarkathi children." Dahine rubbed his tired eyes. Even now, even after being told they were worthless, humans were trying to finish their obligations to others. Give them 2 extra weeks, but no more. "We need everyone home before the deadline." Across the galaxy, the pattern repeated. Humans finished their tasks, trained their replacements, and departed. They left behind working systems, detailed manuals, and complete documentation. They did not sabotage anything. They did not take revenge. They simply left things as functional as possible, because that was how humans worked. Admiral Taeyong watched the progress from his command deck. The military withdrawal was proceeding smoothly. Human defense forces had never been large, but they had been effective. They patrolled trade routes, responded to distress calls, and maintained peace in regions too remote for the major powers to care about. "We are receiving a distress call from the Helios shipping lane," his communications officer reported. "Pirate attack on a civilian transport." Taeyong checked the location. It was 3 days beyond the Sol system boundary, in a region humans had patrolled for decades. "Whose transport?" "Fenari, sir. They are calling for any nearby ships to assist." Taeyong made his decision in seconds. "Deploy the nearest patrol wing. We are not home yet, and we do not abandon people in trouble." The rescue succeeded. The Fenari captain thanked the human pilots with tears in his eyes. "Everyone else ignored our call," he said. "They said it was not their problem anymore." "It is still our problem," the human pilot replied. "At least for 2 more months." As the evacuation entered its 8th month, the last humans prepared to leave their posts. Jiwoo made a final tour of the diplomatic quarter, saying goodbye to the few allies humanity still had. Most were representatives of minor species, the ones who had benefited most from human assistance. "We will miss you," the Fenari delegate said. "You were the only major species that treated us as equals." "You are equals," Jiwoo replied. "Never forget that." The final transport ships departed right on schedule. Not a single human remained outside the Sol system when the deadline arrived. Hannah transmitted the last database update from her ship, sending maintenance manuals for every system humanity had built or maintained. The file was enormous, containing detailed instructions for thousands of complex operations. "Do you think they will read it?" her assistant asked. "No," Hannah said simply. "But we gave them the chance." Admiral Taeyang stood on the bridge of the Resilience as the last human ship crossed into Sol space. Behind them, the galaxy they had helped build for a century and a half continued on without them. He thought about all the small things humans had done. The trade routes they optimized, the medical clinics they ran, the crops they developed, the infrastructure they maintained, the peace they kept in forgotten regions. "Close the border," he ordered. "We are home." On Earth, 50 million returning humans needed housing, jobs, and purpose. It would take years to absorb them all. But humanity had faced worse challenges. They would adapt. They always did. In the Galactic Council chambers, Speaker Veth celebrated with his supporters. They had finally rid themselves of the mediocre humans. Now the real powers could focus on advancing galactic civilization, without wasting resources on a species that contributed nothing of value. None of them noticed the small problems beginning to appear. A communication relay that went offline and stayed offline. A trade shipment that was supposed to arrive but never did. A medical facility that closed because no one knew how to maintain its equipment. These were small things. Insignificant things. The kind of mediocre tasks humans used to handle. The galaxy would soon learn the difference between mediocre and essential. But by then, humanity would be far away. Watching from Earth as the consequences unfolded, 6 months after the last human ship departed, the problems began in earnest. They started small, barely noticeable at first. A shipping delay here, a power fluctuation there. The kind of minor issues that had been rare when humans were present, but now occurred with increasing frequency. ERIN sat at her monitoring station on Earth, listening to galactic communications traffic. Her job was simple: observe and record. Earth's government wanted to know what was happening in the galaxy they had left behind. So Rin and her team tracked public broadcasts, trade communications, and diplomatic channels. "You need to hear this," her colleague said. Forwarding an audio file, it was a distress call from a medical station in the outer territories. The facility was running out of critical supplies because the automated supply chain had failed. They had been calling for help for 3 weeks, but no one had responded. The station served 12 minor species that the major powers considered unimportant. Without supplies, people would start dying within days. RIN forwarded the recording to Giwu, who now served as an advisor to Earth's government. Giwu listened to it 3 times before setting it aside. There were already dozens of similar reports. Hundreds, actually. The number grew every day. On the agricultural world of Kesher 4, Bior's predictions came true ahead of schedule. The Voltari administrator had ignored her warnings about crop rotation. He planted the same fields with the same crops for 2 consecutive seasons, and the yield collapsed. The harvest that should have fed 6 systems barely produced enough for 1. "This is sabotage." The administrator raged over official channels. "The humans deliberately gave us defective seeds." But the seeds were not defective. The soil was exhausted, exactly as Bora had warned. Without proper rotation and nutrient management, the hybrid crops could not survive. The administrator eventually found Bior's detailed instructions in the database. But by then, it was too late to save the season. 6 systems faced food shortages because one's administrator was too proud to read a human's manual. Similar failures cascaded across the galaxy. On the Krillian research station, Omega 7, the life support system began having problems 3 months after Young Mi departed. The Matherian section's humidity controls drifted out of calibration just as she had warned they might. Vesic, confident in his advanced training, ignored the warning alerts. Within a week, 16 Matherian researchers developed serious respiratory infections. The station administrator called in specialists, who discovered that the sensors needed regular recalibration, a fact clearly documented in the human-made maintenance manual. the manual that Vesic had never bothered to read. The station was evacuated for repairs, setting back critical research by 8 months. The trade routes were failing too. The complex scheduling algorithms that humans had developed to prevent bottlenecks and optimize shipping lanes were not being maintained. Ships began arriving at stations simultaneously, creating massive traffic jams. Other routes became underutilized, wasting valuable transport capacity. The Mytharians attempted to use their psychic network to coordinate shipping, confident that their mental abilities would surpass human logistics systems. It was a disaster. Telepathy could not calculate fuel consumption rates, cargo weight distributions, or docking bay availability across thousands of stations. After 2 months of trying, trade efficiency had dropped by 40%. Power grids across frontier worlds began experiencing cascading failures. The infrastructure was old, a patchwork of technologies from dozens of different species. Humans had maintained these systems for decades, learning the quirks and incompatibilities of each component. They knew which alien technologies worked well together and which needed careful monitoring without that knowledge. Grid operators faced constant crises. A Krillian power plant would overload a Voltari distribution network. A Mytharian power regulator would conflict with Sarkothi storage batteries. The failures spread, sometimes taking entire planets offline for days. RIN compiled reports and watched the pattern emerge. The galaxy was not collapsing dramatically. There was no single catastrophic failure. Instead, 1,000 small systems were breaking down simultaneously, and no one knew how to fix them. The problems were exactly the kind of mediocre, unglamorous issues that humans had handled quietly for a century and a half. The Galactic Council is calling an emergency session, Rin told Jiwoo. They are discussing the infrastructure crisis. Are they calling it a crisis yet? Giwoo asked. No, they are calling it a series of unrelated technical difficulties. Giwoo smiled without humor. Of course they are. On the frontier worlds, the suffering was worse. Medical facilities that humans had run were closing. The major species had never cared about these clinics because they served populations too small to matter politically. But to the Phanari, the Sarkothi, the Pleth, and dozens of other minor species, those clinics were the difference between life and death. Plague broke out on 3 Phanari colonies. Without the preventive medicine programs humans had maintained, the disease spread unchecked. The Phanari government begged the Galactic Council for assistance, but the Council was overwhelmed with its own problems. The outbreak killed 12,000 Phanari before finally burning itself out. Water. Purification systems failed on mining colonies. The Krillian military base on Vendor Prime, where Hannah had tried to warn engineer Thros, experienced a major contamination event when the filters were not changed on schedule. 17 soldiers died before the problem was identified. When the investigation reviewed the records, they found Hannah's detailed instructions, clearly explaining how to prevent exactly this failure. Thros was demoted but not fired. He had only done what everyone else was doing, dismissing human expertise as unnecessary. In the Galactic Council chambers, Speaker Vreth faced angry delegates demanding solutions. The infrastructure problems were affecting everyone now, even the major powers. Trade was down. Food production was falling. Communication networks were unreliable. Power grids were failing. We need to establish new maintenance protocols, a Mytharian counselor suggested. We should create a galactic technical service to handle these issues. An excellent idea, Vreth agreed. We will assign our best engineers to study the problems. But their best engineers were discovering something troubling. The systems were far more complex than anyone had realized. Humans had been maintaining technology from hundreds of different species, each with unique requirements and incompatibilities. It was not a matter of simply reading a manual. It required deep expertise built over decades of practical experience. The manuals humans had left behind were comprehensive, but they assumed a certain level of background knowledge. They explained how to maintain the systems, but not how to understand them. That understanding had been in the minds of 50 million humans who were now back on Earth. Forbidden from returning, RIN intercepted a classified council communication. A team of Krillian engineers had spent 3 months trying to restart a failed trade route optimization system. They could not make it work. The algorithms were too complex, the variables too numerous. They needed someone who understood not just programming, but logistics, economics, and the specific needs of thousands of different trading partners. They needed a human. But the Council's pride would not let them admit it. "How many dead so far?" Giwu asked Rin one evening. "Confirmed deaths directly attributable to infrastructure failures. 43,000. Estimated deaths from indirect causes like food shortages and medical supply problems? Over 200,000? Juhu closed her eyes. 200,000 lives lost because the galaxy thought humans were mediocre. Then came the crisis that could no longer be ignored. The Nexus Station, a massive orbital platform supporting 2 million inhabitants, began experiencing life support failures. The station was a marvel of engineering, built by the Voltari a century ago. Humans had been maintaining it for 80 years, keeping the aging systems functional through constant care and expertise. Now those systems were failing. No one knew how to fix them. The Voltari engineers who built the station were long dead. The current generation had never bothered to learn the maintenance protocols. Why would they? Humans handled that. The station had 72 hours before complete life support collapse. 2 million people would die, including members of every major species in the Council. Aaron sent the alert to Giwu immediately. This is it. The crisis they cannot ignore. Gu watched the emergency broadcasts. She saw the panic spreading across the galaxy. She saw the Council convening an emergency session. She saw Speaker Vreth finally beginning to understand what humanity had actually been doing all those years. Earth's communication. Systems received thousands of private messages. Minor species begging for help. Individual aliens who remembered human friends asking if there was anything that could be done. Even a few messages from Council delegates sent secretly, admitting that they had made a terrible mistake. But the Council itself remained silent. Even facing catastrophe, they could not bring themselves to officially ask Earth for help. Jiwoo waited, knowing the call would eventually come. The only question was whether it would come in time to save those 2 million lives. The news of Nexus Station's impending disaster spread across Earth within hours. June, a young engineer who had been born on a frontier colony and returned during the evacuation, watched the broadcasts with growing frustration. He was 23 years old and remembered the galaxy with fondness. He had alien friends there, people he cared about. "We have to do something," June told his colleagues at the engineering center where he now worked. 2 million people are going to die. They voted us out, one of the older engineers replied bitterly. "They said we were mediocre and worthless. Now we should risk our people to save them." "They were wrong," June insisted. "But that does not mean we should let innocent people die. Most of the people on that station did not vote to expel us. They are just ordinary citizens trying to live their lives." The debate raged across Earth. Public opinion was divided. Some wanted to help because it was the right thing to do. Others wanted the galaxy to face the full consequences of their decision. The government was paralyzed, unable to decide. Hannah watched the technical specifications of Nexus Station's failing systems. She had worked on similar Voltari-built stations before. She understood the aging technology, the cascading failures that were occurring. More importantly, she knew how to fix them. "I could solve this remotely," she told Jiwoo. "Give me access to their systems, and I could stabilize the life support within 6 hours. But Earth's government has not authorized any contact with the Council." "I know," Jiwoo said. "They are waiting for the Council to ask. People are dying while we wait for politicians to overcome their pride. Yes, both their pride and ours." Across the galaxy, the situation deteriorated by the hour. Nexus Station's 2 million inhabitants prepared for evacuation. But there were not enough ships nearby to move everyone in time. The station's administrators sent increasingly desperate messages to every available authority. The Voltari government promised to send engineers, but everyone knew they would arrive too late. In the shadows of galactic politics, something else was happening. Representatives of minor species were meeting secretly, pooling their resources and influence. The Fenari, the Sarkothi, the Pleth, and dozens of others. They had suffered the most from humanity's absence. And they understood what needed to happen. They sent a joint delegation to Speaker Vreth with a simple message: ask Earth for help, or we will withdraw from the Council ourselves. Vreth was cornered. His political coalition was fracturing. The infrastructure crisis affected everyone now, and his promises that they could manage without humans had proven false. The Nexus Station disaster would be his legacy unless he acted. But asking Earth for help meant admitting he had been wrong. It meant acknowledging that humanity had never been mediocre. It meant facing the truth that he had dismissed an essential part of galactic civilization out of arrogance and pride. Admiral Taeyong prepared his ships anyway. He had not waited for government authorization. If Earth decided to help, his fleet would be ready to move immediately. He had already identified the fastest ships and the most experienced crews. Many of them volunteered without hesitation. We might be violating Earth's neutrality order, his second-in-command warned. Then court-martial me afterward, Taeyang replied. I am not watching 2 million people die when we have the ability to save them. On Earth, June organized a public demonstration. Thousands of young people gathered outside the government buildings, demanding action. They held signs with simple messages: save them, and we are better than this, and humanity helps. The demonstration was peaceful but determined. June gave a speech that was broadcast across the planet. They called us mediocre, he said. They said we did not matter. Maybe we did not matter to them, but we mattered to the Fenari children who got medical care in our clinics. We mattered to the Sarkothi farmers who learned to grow food from our agricultural programs. We mattered to the millions of ordinary people across the galaxy who benefited from the unglamorous work we did every single day. He paused, looking at the crowd. Now, 2 million of those ordinary people are going to die, not because we cannot save them. We can. But because we are waiting for an apology from people too proud to give it. I say we are better than that. I say we help because helping is what humans do. Not because they deserve it, but because it is right. The speech went viral. Within hours, protests spread across Earth. The public pressure became impossible to ignore. Gu received a private communication from Earth's Prime Minister. If the Council asks, can we actually save them? Yes, Giwu replied without hesitation. Hannah can stabilize the life support remotely. Admiral Taeyong can have support teams on the station within 18 hours if needed. We have the expertise and the resources. And if the Council does not ask, then 2 million people die, and we lose any moral authority to criticize the Council's decision to expel us. We become exactly what they accused us of being, a species that only cares about ourselves. The Prime Minister was silent for a long moment. Prepare the response plan. If they ask, we help. But they have to ask. In the Galactic Council chambers, Speaker Vreth faced the assembled delegates. The chamber was tense, angry. Everyone had solutions, but none of them would work in time. The Nexus Station had 48 hours left, and all their best efforts had failed to stop the cascade. A Voltari engineer delivered the final assessment. We cannot fix it. The systems are too old, too complex, and we do not have the expertise. The only species that maintained stations like this successfully were ... double quotes. He trailed off, unwilling to finish the sentence. Were the humans, a Matharian counselor, finished for him? Say it. We need to say it out loud. The humans were not mediocre. They were essential, and we were too arrogant to see it. Vreth stood slowly. Every eye in the chamber turned to him. This was his moment of decision. He could maintain his pride and watch 2 million people die. Or he could do what needed to be done. He thought about his career, his reputation, his political future. Then he thought about 2 million lives hanging in the balance. People who trusted the Council to protect them, people who had done nothing wrong except live on a station that the Council had failed to maintain. Open a channel to Earth, Vreth said quietly. The chamber fell silent. Everyone understood what was about to happen. This is Speaker Vreth of the Galactic Council requesting direct communication with Earth's government. The wait seemed endless. Finally, Giwu's face appeared on the main display. She looked calm, composed, giving nothing away. "This is Ambassador Giwu, representing Earth. What can we do for you, Speaker Vreth?" The words were harder than anything Vreth had ever said. "We have an emergency at Nexus Station. 2 million lives are at risk. Our engineers cannot solve the problem, He stopped, forcing himself to continue. "We were wrong about humanity. We need your help. Please." Giwu let the silence stretch for 3 seconds. Just long enough to let the council feel the weight of the moment. Hannah Giwu said, turning to someone off-screen, "How quickly can you save them?" Hannah appeared on the display next to Giwu. "Give me access to their systems now, and I can stabilize life support within 6 hours. Send technical teams for permanent repairs, and we can have the station fully operational in 3 days." Gu looked back at Vreth. "Earth will help. Not because you deserve it, but because 2 million innocent people deserve to live. Hannah will begin immediately. Admiral Taeyong's fleet will depart within the hour with support teams. But Speaker Vreth, when this crisis is over, we need to talk. Really talk. About what went wrong and how to fix it." "Yes," Vreth said, and for the first time in his long career, he felt genuinely humble. "Yes, we will talk." Hannah's fingers were already flying across her interface. "I have access to their systems. Beginning stabilization protocols now. This is going to take some time, so everyone should get comfortable." Across the galaxy, billions watched as a human engineer working from Earth began the complex process of saving Nexus Station. She worked steadily, methodically, explaining each step to the Voltari engineers watching. It was not just a rescue. It was a lesson, and the galaxy was finally ready to learn. Hannah worked for 11 straight hours, her hands steady on the controls as she guided Nexus Station back from the brink of catastrophe. The Voltari engineers watching her learned something valuable. Saving a failing system was not about advanced technology or superior intelligence. It was about understanding the intricate relationships between thousands of components, knowing which failures would cascade and which could be safely ignored, and having the experience to make split-second decisions. At hour 6, she stabilized the life support. At hour 9, she restored power to critical systems. At hour 11, she handed control back to the station's engineers with detailed instructions for maintaining what she had fixed. "You have 72 hours before Admiral Taeyong's teams arrive with replacement parts," she told them. "Until then, do not deviate from the protocols I have sent you. The system is stable, but fragile." The Voltari chief engineer looked at her with something approaching awe. "How did you know which systems to prioritize?" "We tried everything, but every fix created new problems." "Experience," Hannah said simply. "I've been maintaining stations like this for 24 years. You learn to see the patterns." 2 million people on Nexus Station celebrated their survival. They did not care about council politics or species pride. They only knew that humans had saved them when no one else could. Admiral Taeyong's fleet arrived at Nexus Station 41 hours later, carrying technical teams and enough replacement parts to completely overhaul the aging systems. The repair crews worked alongside station engineers, teaching as they installed. These were not just repairs. They were education. On Earth, Giwu prepared for the negotiations that would reshape the galaxy. The Council had requested formal talks, and this time the humans would not be dismissed. The location was chosen as neutral space between Earth and the Council territories. The date was set for 3 weeks after the Nexus Station rescue. June. The young engineer who had led the demonstrations was selected as part of Earth's delegation. He represented the new generation of humans who would build bridges back to the galaxy. But he also represented those who remembered being dismissed and would never let it happen again. "What do we want from them?" June asked Giwu during preparation meetings. "Justice," Giwu replied, "and prevention. We want the galaxy to acknowledge what happened and ensure it never happens again." Minesio, a philosopher who had spent years studying galactic cultures, joined the delegation as an advisor. She had been developing a framework for what she called the principle of interdependence, a philosophy that recognized the value of all contributions to civilization, not just the most visible or impressive. Every species has strengths. Menesio explained to the delegation. The Krillians are warriors. The Matharians are telepaths. The Voltari are builders. But civilization is not built on strengths alone. It requires the 10,000 unglamorous tasks that keep society functioning. Someone has to maintain the systems. Someone has to coordinate the logistics. Someone has to care for the forgotten populations. That was humanity's strength, and the galaxy dismissed it as weakness. Negotiations took place on a neutral station. Speaker Vreth led the council delegation, but he was a changed leader. The Nexus Station crisis had broken something in him. Not his competence, but his arrogance. He understood now what had been lost. Gu opened the talks with a simple statement. Earth will help the galaxy recover from the infrastructure crisis, but not under the old terms. If humanity returns, it will be as full partners with voice and vote equal to any species. The days of being dismissed as mediocre are over. What are your demands? Vreth asked. First, full restoration of Earth's council membership and voting rights. Second, formal recognition and protection for all minor species. The Fenari, Sarkothi, Pleth, and others suffered most from our absence because the major powers ignored them. That ends now. Third, fair compensation for human expertise and labor. We will help rebuild what has fallen, but we will be paid appropriately for that work. Fourth, a new galactic charter that recognizes the value of essential work, regardless of how unglamorous it appears. A Krillian counselor objected. You want us to pay you for maintenance work? That is mercenary. No, June interjected. It is professional. You pay your warriors. You pay your telepaths. You pay your miners. But you expected humans to maintain your entire civilization for free because you considered the work beneath notice. That was never fair, and it will not continue. Menesco presented the principle of interdependence to the council. She explained it clearly, using examples from 100 different cultures. A building requires both architects and foundation layers. A garden requires both planters and those who pull weeds. A civilization requires both innovators and maintainers. When you dismiss the maintainers as mediocre, the entire structure collapses. The galaxy has learned this lesson. Now we must ensure the lesson is never forgotten. The negotiations lasted 3 weeks. The council resisted at first, but they had no leverage. Across the galaxy, systems continued to fail. Food shortages worsened. Medical crises multiplied. Trade remained crippled. They needed humanity more than humanity needed them. Gradually, agreements were reached. Earth would be restored to full council membership. A new council section would be created to give minor species representation. Human technical services would be contracted at fair market rates. And the Galactic Charter would be amended to include the principle of interdependence. But there was one more demand, and it was non-negotiable. The galaxy must remember what happened here, Jiwoo said. Not to shame anyone, but to learn from it. We propose a memorial and an annual observance. A day when the galaxy pauses to honor all those who do essential work that others take for granted. Vreth agreed immediately. Yes. We will remember. I will make sure of it personally. The treaty was signed 6 months after Nexus Station's rescue. Humanity returned to the galaxy, but everything was different now. Human engineers commanded respect and professional salaries. Human diplomats sat at the council table as equals. Human medical workers, agricultural specialists, logistics coordinators, and maintenance technicians were valued and appreciated. More importantly, the minor species gained a voice. The Fenari delegates stood before the council for the first time in their history and spoke of their needs. The Sarkothi proposed new trade agreements. The Pleth demanded better working conditions in the mines. And the council listened, because they had learned what happened when they dismissed those they considered unimportant. Hannah returned to her work, maintaining galactic infrastructure. But now she led a team of engineers from multiple species. She taught them what she knew, building the expertise that had been lost. Young Krillian engineers who once would have dismissed her now competed for positions on her team. Biora went back to Kesher, and found the fields recovering under new management. The Voltari administrator, who had ignored her warnings, had been replaced by someone who read every word of her manuals. Food production was rising again. This time the administrators understood why. Admiral Taeyang established a new galactic patrol service, funded by the Council and staffed by humans and allied species. They protected trade routes and responded to distress calls in regions the major powers still ignored. The forgotten corners of the galaxy were forgotten no longer. Years later, on the first annual Day of Remembrance, Giwu stood before the memorial erected at the old council headquarters. It was a simple structure, listing the names of those who had died during the infrastructure collapse. 243,000 names. The cost of dismissing essential work. Speaker Vreth stood beside her. He was older now, near retirement. But he had spent his final years in office working to rebuild what his arrogance had broken. He had become, against all odds, a genuine ally of humanity and the minor species. Do you think they have truly learned the lesson? Giwu asked him quietly. Some of Vreth replied. Others will need to be reminded. That is why this memorial exists. That is why we observe this day every year. So the galaxy never forgets what happened when we took essential work for granted. June brought his children to the memorial. They were too young to remember the evacuation, but he wanted them to understand their history. He told them about leaving the galaxy, about watching it collapse, about the moment when pride finally broke and help was requested. Were they bad people? His daughter asked.
No.
June said. They were good people who made a bad mistake. They learned from it, and that is what matters. The galaxy is better now than it was before. It was true. The crisis had forced changes that would never have happened otherwise. Minor species had rights and representation. Essential work was valued and compensated. The principle of interdependence was taught in schools. Across 100 worlds, the galaxy had learned that civilizations are not built by the strong alone, the smart alone, or the advanced alone. They are built by countless people doing countless essential tasks that others might never notice. They are built by the ones who maintain the systems, coordinate the logistics, care for the forgotten, and do the unglamorous work that keeps everything running. They are built by people. Like humans, Manesio published her complete philosophy of interdependence, and it became required reading for all council delegates. She wrote in clear, simple language that everyone could understand. Every task that keeps civilization functioning is essential. Every person who performs that task deserves respect. The moment we forget this truth, we begin the journey toward collapse across the galaxy. In thousands of schools and millions of homes, young beings of every species learned about the great collapse and recovery. They learned about the humans who were dismissed as mediocre. They learned about the price the galaxy paid for that dismissal. And they learned the most important lesson of all. Never take for granted those who hold everything together. On Earth, the 50 million returned humans had built new lives. Many eventually went back to the galaxy as respected professionals. Others stayed home, content with the world they had always belonged to. But all of them remembered. They remembered being dismissed. They remembered leaving. They remembered watching the galaxy learn, and they remembered the moment. When the call for help finally came, Giwu retired from diplomatic service and wrote a memoir of those years. The final chapter was titled The Foundation. In it, she wrote, "They called us mediocre. They said we provided nothing of value. But when we left, the galaxy fell. Because we were never the ceiling of achievement. We were the foundation everything else was built upon. And you cannot build a house without a foundation, no matter how beautiful the walls might be." The book became the most widely read human text in galactic history, not because it gloated or sought revenge, but because it told a truth everyone needed to hear in the Galactic Council chambers. Where once Speaker Vreth had triumphantly announced humanity's expulsion, a new generation of delegates debated policy and made decisions. On the wall behind them hung a simple plaque with words in 100 languages. The same words in every tongue. We remember the foundation. The galaxy had dismissed humanity's value. After they left, the galaxy paid the price. Now, the galaxy would never make that mistake again.